So what has the Quran taught us about Mary is a very good question that we don't have an answer to. And that's why I'm addressing this question. Hopefully, at my research, I will keep the slides off for this moment. Maybe I'll go back to them at the end. In the last 2 decades or so, more and more voices, including that of the founder and former head of this institute, called to reread the life of Mary as an ancient life of a Jewish woman, acknowledging and validating the Jewishness of Mary, and thus using her image as a possible bridge between Judaism and Christianity. Alongside this, the place of Mary in Jewish-Christian polemics has been studied much more in depth in those past 20 years than ever before, as well as a role in shaping the Kabbalistic idea of the Shekhinah, this female side of God. Now, the rise of the cult of Mary in Europe in the 11th to, say, 13th century has been transformative to the image of Mary in Judaism in many ways, because it brought Mary to the attention of the Jews in ways that it never did before. Some of the more interesting aspects of the history of Mary through Jewish eyes have generally not been completely explored. But the European sort of branch is more developed than what I will soon talk about, which is the Eastern branch. So what we could see that some of the things that happen is that Mary takes more and more of shape, or becomes more and more central in Jewish thinking about Christianity around the 11th century. Because of the cult of Mary and the involvement of Jews in, or the involvement of Mary in anti-Jewish polemics, or in blood libels, and also in stories in which she saves Jews in many ways. But what's more interesting is that we find that in Jewish retellings of the Bible in the 11th and the 12th century, there are aspects of Mariology which enter through the back door when they're reinterpreting biblical figures, which are not necessarily, well, obviously not Mary, because as you know, she's not there in the Jewish Bible. So I see that while scholars have called for a more central place for Mary in Jewish-Christian dialogue, I believe that exploring Jewish Mary without this third party in the conversation, which is Islam, is less beneficial and also a bit misleading in creating a picture of Mary. The question which I wish to ask is, how does Islam, assist in mediating this figure of Mary into Judaism? The Quran, as you know, conflates the figure of Mary, mother of Jesus, and Miriam, sister of Moses and Aaron, in the Hebrew Bible. And to look at the influence of this conflation is relatively easy, to following whatever small observations of Marian cult in the 11th century. It's just out there. You can see the changes in the figure of Miriam after the Quran, and interpreting the figure of Miriam in Jewish sources after the Quran and before the Quran. And this is partially what I want to do. Maryam, as she's called in the Quran, is the only figure that actually gains, or I don't know what, has a whole surah dedicated to her. She's mentioned in the Quran, I have to say, much more than she's mentioned in the New Testament. And in a way has a more prominent part within the Quran than actually in canonical scripture, at least until a certain point, within Christianity. And she is represented as a biblical female hero, and also an heir of other heroines like Miriam, but also Eve and Rebecca and Tamar and Hagar and other mothers of the messianic line, and as the Magna Mater of Judeo-Christianity in many ways. She's a prophet, and she's one of the prophets that anticipate the coming of Muhammad, for example. But how does all this feed into the Jewish communities of the East? Those who actually know very little about the European cult of Mary, but know a lot about what the Muslim communities around them are thinking and doing. And in a way may understand the figure of Mary not through its Christian interpretation, but through its Muslim interpretation, is what I'm very interested in. Since nobody asked this question yet of how is Mary mediated through Islam into Judaism, I don't have many answers. What I do have, however, is a corpus, or actually corpora, in which I can look. And I think it would be a good idea to look. So if you talk about the 11th to 13th century in Europe as the height of the cult of Mary, what we have as an equivalent would be the 11th century to the 13th century in the Gniza collection, which gives us quite a lot of references to Mary, and actually also to Maryam and Isa in their Arabic names, which indicates this transition. So I basically want to look at three small corpora within the Cairo Gniza, but not only. One is those late Byzantine midrashic compilations like Lekach Tov, which reread biblical stories, and especially around the female figures of Miriam and Rivka, and figures that can undergo changes through the reading of Mary in the Quran. The other one is the polemic corpus, especially Toldot Yeshu and Pulmus Nestor HaKohen, Komer, which is a very interesting, because it's the first actually Jewish-Christian polemic that is written from the Jewish perspective, and it's really early. It's 9th century. It's early for a Jewish polemic text, not for a Christian polemic text. And it was written in Syria, and it's influenced by polemic literature, Muslim polemic literature against Christianity. So there is something that's going on there. The other group is the Toldot Yeshu, which is the Jewish counter-gospel, in which the figure of Mary is prominent. And Mary is a bit of a seismograph there for how the Jews feel about Mary, because she starts out as really this promiscuous woman, and all the stereotypes of, a virgin who's not really a virgin and all of that. And she ends up as being a really nice, good Jewish woman who was tricked into something, or was raped, or was misled, and really sympathetic towards her. And we can sort of follow the image of Mary and how it changes, and see how Jews feel about, not only about Christianity, but specifically about this figure. And the third corpus that I would look at is the versions that we have of Sefer Zerubbabel, which is an apocalyptic Jewish text from around the 7th century, we think that it's actually from that depicts messianic hopes, which arise also from the rise of Islam, basically. And it's, once again, a Mediterranean text within such context that has a very strong figure of a mother to the Messiah that it depicts. So there is this woman called Heftiba, and she is, in so many different ways, a Mary figure. But also a Maryam figure, because understanding Miriam as part of the Davidic line is something that is actually mediated through the Quran. And now I have to stop. So I hope you will find this something worthy of researching, and thank you for listening.